Start.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Masilamani, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Kristu Jayanti College. And now we are going to learn a poem, The Child Who Was Shot Dead by Soldiers at Nyanga, written by Ingrid Jonker, and a South African poet. This poem is also considered to be a protest poem written by Ingrid Jonker during the apartheid period in South Africa. And this poem deals with a pass law which has been practiced in South Africa the moment a Dutch East Indian Company entered into South Africa in the 18th century. From that time onwards, it has been changing from time to time, and it became an active law in South Africa in the 1948, and it existed till 1986 in South Africa. The poem deals with a protest against apartheid law, or the era which went through or gone through in South Africa for a long period of a time. And the poet Ingrid Jonker was a significant South African poet and known for her poignant and powerful verses that often addressed the harsh reality of apartheid era in South Africa. And she was one of the founders of the modern African literature. And all her works reflect a deep and emotional resonance and a fierce commitment to social justice and right of Black Africans. Her experience during the apartheid era deeply influenced her writing and the perspective on life. And she became an international figure known for her passionate and politically charged poetry in her writings. Her poems have been widely translated into several languages, including this poem, The Child Who Was Shot Dead by the Soldiers at Nyanga. Background of the poem. This poem is an heartbreaking and reflection on the tragedy of violence against the innocent children who lost their lives during this apartheid era from 1948 to 1986. This was written and published in the year 1963 after she made her visit to the police station to see a body of the child under her mother's arms who had been shot dead by the police at Nyanga, Cape Town, South Africa. This happened in the aftermath of a massacre of 69 people and 29 children at Sharpeville on 21st March 1960. About 700 Black people protested against this pass law, and 249 victims were there, and 180 people injured during the protest. They protested against the pass law. Pass law is nothing but an internal passport, and this is considered to be a racial segregation by the whites on the Black Africans. The child in the title of the poem is a symbol of all the innocent children who were killed by the soldiers during the protest that took place at Sharpeville. And a well-known writer, a political activist, Nelson Mandela, he read this poem in original African during his address in the inauguration of the first democratic parliament on 24th May 1994. The writing style of Jonker explores the themes of innocence, loss, and the impact of violence on children, the future children, the young generations. Our work is infused with anti-apartheid sentiments, advocating for human rights and dignity. Though this particular poem is divided into 4 sections, it does not have any particular rhyme scheme or a rhythm. The whole poem is written in free verse. There is no specific writing pattern, writing meter. The isolated final line highlights the poet's message without a passport, the final line, which signifies freedom is needed for the South African blacks. Let's move on to the poem now. The child who was shot dead by soldiers at Nyaga. But the first line and the title, there is a contradiction. The first line says, the child who was shot dead. The title says, the child who was shot dead. Whereas the opening line of the poem says, the child is not dead. Which means the child is physically dead, medically dead. Whereas the child may be spiritually alive in the minds of the South African people. The child raises his fist against his mother, who screams Africa, screams the smell of freedom and ether in the locations of the heart under siege. So the child is not physically dead, whereas the child spiritually is alive in the minds of Africans, South Africans. And the second line says, the child raises his fist. It symbolizes the child resist against this kind of a law, unjust. Raising the fist is a symbol of resistance, violence against unjust. And against his mother. Why does the child raises his fist against his mother? And the second stanza also you see that the child raises his fist against father. But it should have been in the same line, mother and father. Why? What is the reason? It shows that generation gap between the young generation and the older generation in South Africa, who screams Africa, which shows that screaming is an intense anger and pain and agony of black South Africans, and screams the smell of freedom and ether. There is screaming, the smell is completely a different sense. One is the sound, the other one is smell, where she brings the two senses together in it, of freedom and ether, the small flower in the locations of the heart under siege. The child raises his fist against his father, which means this child is not happy with the older generation. The reason is that the older generation, young people, are against the older generations because they never resisted this kind of unjust law. They were so passive. They never raised their voice against any kind of unjust that happened against black South Africans. They were so submissive, and they did not raise voice against any kind of such practices. That's why the child raises his fist against his father in the march of the generations, where the group of people who marched towards the police station against this pasla, again, who scream Africa, scream the smell of justice and blood in the streets of his armed pride. So after this incident, there were so many young people who joined ANC, African National Congress, which was founded by Nelson Mandela. It is also called as a paramilitary force, who wanted to show their armed pride. They wanted to sacrifice their life for the sake of their own people. So many young people who wanted to sacrifice their life through shedding their blood against this kind of a white man's dominance in South Africa. And moving to stanza 3, the child is not dead. Yonker repeats the child is not dead, the child is not dead, to give an emphasis that the child is alive in the hearts of the people, to inspire, to intrigate, to create, giving a hope. The child gives a hope for the new generations, the future generations, so that they can not be submissive. They cannot go through all this kind of a problem like the older generation went through. So the child is as a symbol of a hope, a symbol of a resistance. And she says the child is not dead, neither at Lanka nor at Nyanka. It's a major black township. The major black townships like Langa, Nyanga, Orlando, and Sharpeville. And these are the major township for South African blacks, nor at the police station in Philippines, where he lies with a bullet in his head. That was the police station where Ingrid Jonker, who visited the police station after the child who was shot dead and in his mother's arms, and says that, look at it, it shows the brutality of the police people. It shows the brutality of the soldiers. It shows the brutality of the white man's dominance among South Africans. And moving to the next stanza, the child is the shadow of the soldiers. The child is considered to be a shadow of the soldiers. The soldiers, what did they do against the black people? Their violence. And the child also wants to be so violent in nature to fight against with the same spirit against this white dominance. On guard with equipments like guns, saracen, and baton. The child is present at all the meetings and legislations, which shows the child with the similar equipments and tools is ready to fight against the unjust law, the past law, the apartheid era. The child is present at all the meetings. Though the child is physically dead, in all the administrations, when the government policies, legislations, law, in all the government official meetings, the subject of the child has been discussed. The subject of the child as well as the subject of violence have been discussed in all the government official meetings and the legislations. The child became an instrument, and she is the instrument of a change in the South African apartheid era. The child peeps through the window of houses and into the hearts of mothers. Look at that. The child peeps through the window of the houses and into the hearts of mothers. The child stays in the memory of a million mothers. The child who just wanted to play in the sun at Nyanga is everywhere. And this shows the innocence. At that age, the child should have been playing in the sunlight. And now the child is physically dead, who had supposed to be playing. The innocent lives have been taken away by this past law. And the child who became a man treks through all of Africa. Look at that. The child soon, how fast the child has become a man who walks through all of Africa, which means after the child's death, there has been several changes, policies have brought as a result of a child's death. So the child is the cause for bringing a new change and transformation in the history of South Africa. And the child who became a giant travels through the whole world. And the child became a giant travels. She became a giant, a big, huge man with power, who obtained power, who were taken out of this kind of a unjust practice, became a huge in power. And the same child travels through the whole world, which means that shows they obtained freedom from this kind of a past law. And the last line, the poem, there is a space, and the last line of the poem ends with without a pass. Without a pass. Now you see that there is a transformation. Black South Africans travel around the world without any pass, which means without internal pass, right? Which restrict their movement. This past law restrict their life. This past law restrict their job opportunities. This past law restrict their marriage. So all these have been taken out, and they broke the shackle of a past law, and they started coming out of this land and started migrating to